What screams, "I'm bad with money"? Hello, everyone. We have a pretty interesting topic today. Write your opinion in the comments. Enjoy the show. Story 1. I work on cars for a living, and the vast majority of the BMWs that come into my shop have slick tires and lights blinking on their dash. So many of these people can barely afford a luxury car, let alone the maintenance required to keep them nice and running. Story 2. I had a buddy in college who would go through a cycle of bragging about how much money he had, spend it all on dumb stuff, then brag about how poor he was, all while bragging how he was a rich kid. The best part was when he was bragging about having some money to this girl he liked. Turns out that girl came from an actually wealthy family. She said, "It's only $5K. Why do you keep mentioning it? Is that a lot to you?" That event shut him up for a bit. LOL. Story 3. Looking at payment amount and not purchase price. A coworker asked one time, "This phone is $1,300, but I can get it for just $60/mo for 2 years. Seems like a good deal to me. $60/mo isn't that much. Should I do it?" I asked him, "Does your phone work?" "Yes." "Okay. If someone dropped $1,300 in your lap right now, is this what you would spend it on?" "No." "Then it's not a good use of your money." He showed up to work the next week with the brand new phone. Another co-worker wanted a Honda Ridgeline. He went to a car broker and said he wanted this truck, X years, Y miles, and his payment could only be $500/mo. He was amazed the guy got him the truck for that payment. He had no idea what his final purchase price was, what his loan term was, or what his interest rate was. All he knew was that he could afford the payment. Story 4. Constantly ordering food for delivery, despite living within close proximity of a grocery store, especially when you are not financially secure enough to be doing that in the first place. Nowadays, $12 McDonald's order is like $30 through DoorDash. If you that desperate for some McDonald's, just walk, bro. Story 5. As someone who is formerly bad with money, being in a cycle of being in debt and using apps to borrow money to pay towards your credit cards, and to have money for food. Thankfully, I'm no longer trapped in this cycle and I never want to be in that cycle again. Story 6. My girlfriend and I keep our finances separate. Why? She once did some extra work somewhere for one day only, and this was paid well. 2 weeks later, she came up to me asking for some money. Me. Why? Her. Because I still haven't got my money for this work I had done recently. Me. So? This was a one-time thing? It should have given you extra money, but now you're out of money? Her. Yes, I already bought some things I wanted. Me. Even if they didn't pay you already? What about the money you usually earn? Turns out she literally spends everything she gets. Now she got some extra money and already spent it on even more useless stuff. That's why we keep finance separated. I would be bankrupt if she had access to my account. Story 7. My ex-wife. Before divorce, we filed bankruptcy. 80% of the debt was in her name. Divorced over other reasons, but money was part of it. Left her the house, but she could not keep up with bills. Instead of selling, had to be foreclosed on. She met a guy and they moved on a rented house. He maintained bills and wasn't a bad guy. I even met a few times. They broke up and again she was evicted for not paying rent and bills. Now she lives with her sister and the kids I was paying child support for now live with me. 3 years living with her sister and she still can't afford to move out. Story 8. My family is in $20K of debt, but my mother and her brother just went on her 13th trip to Spain in the last 12 months. "Because I can afford it," she snapped at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning as I caught sneaking out for another run. She thinks that I'll get a well-paying job to bail her out, which is not happening because if I gave her the money for the debt, she'd probably spend it all from when she leave the house and on the way to the bank. She works a minimum wage, 12 hours a week job, high school dropout, and has my father deported after an argument when I was young, bragging about it to this day. My older sister, a full-time college student, has a part-time job at the same place she works at and earns almost 2x as much minus the overtime. Story 9. The most obvious answer is an expensive car on a low or moderate income. A lot of people buy enormous pickups or luxury cars that they can't actually afford, and then complain about living paycheck to paycheck. A subtle, counterintuitive answer is thinking that having no debt at all is a virtue. A lot of low-income, unsophisticated people who got burned by credit card debt in the past go on to raise their kids to think that debt is inherently a bad thing. They'll take bizarre pride in the fact that they saved for 18 months to buy a refrigerator instead of buying it on an 18-month, 0% repayment schedule. Sometimes they don't have credit cards at all and just sort of squeeze by in life with a debit card and the shittiest clunker they could afford with pure cash. These people are just as bad with money, they've just fooled themselves into thinking they're virtuous for it. They're like people who won't keep knives in the kitchen because they might cut themselves trying to slice a tomato. So they just rip tomatoes apart with their bare hands when trying to make a salad. Story 10. Nice cars outside rundown homes. If you have a $50K vehicle and a tarp on your roof, you most likely have your priorities in the wrong order. When I worked in finance at a dealership, it was insane the amount of people coming in looking for higher trim-level vehicles for $50K plus on $50K household incomes. Story 11. I have a friend who makes almost twice what I do. She's probably close to 6 figures while working from home. Living freely in her parents' home, doesn't drive, refuses to take local transit, only the more expensive regional train for special occasions maybe monthly, and doesn't Uber much. She doesn't come across as particularly irresponsible, but I've always wondered where TF all her money goes since she'll regularly say she's tight on cash. Story 12. My mom and sister live together still. Couldn't afford rent or their car between the two of them. Nearly had the car repossessed and were closing in on eviction until my grandmother loaned them. She explicitly said, "Pay me back when you're more stable." Enough money to keep the car and stay in their apartment. 4 months later, my sister gets her tax refund for $4,500. She had a kid and isn't with the father. And instead of making any effort to pay my grandmother back, pay off the car, or have any sort of emergency fund, the two of them buy an expensive purebred puppy, Airedale Terrier. They dropped over $2K for the dog, and then spent another $500 on a crate, toys, leashes, and dog food. Less than 6 months later, they lost the car and were evicted. They moved in with my aunt, and her husband hated the dog, so it was taken to the SPCA. It wasn't even a year old. My grandmother didn't see a cent of money returned before she died. So, people bad with money buy things they can't afford instead of stabilizing what they already have. Story 13. Renting something to own it from Rent-A-Center because you couldn't afford to buy it outright. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law do this shit all the time, and their justification is asinine. Well, I justify it because I can't afford to pay the $500 right now, but I can afford to pay $100/mo over the course of 7 months. Or some stupid shit like that. Basically, they can't afford the lump sum price now, but they can afford to make monthly payments that add up to way more than the actual price of the thing. Story 14. Buying a new car because your old one is going to be out of warranty soon and you can't afford an unexpected repair bill. Then buying the new one based on monthly payments and not OTD price, and then doubling down and letting them basically steal your trade in, which had equity. Had a friend do this. We had the same car 6 years ago. Mine is lower trim level. Friend replaced theirs twice since I got mine because of the warranty thing each time. Mine's been paid off for years. Why not just pay it off and bank the payment money for repairs? I'll never understand this. Story 15. My wife has 2 friends that are the worst people I've ever met with money. Friend 1. They have a kid and are convinced that they can make it on one income, because my parents could do it. The wife has a shopping addiction and is constantly buying expensive clothes for her baby and things for the house. The husband works stocking shelves and drives Uber sometimes. They had a $70K settlement that they threw down the drain in about a year. They got evicted from their apartment for not paying, and had their Cadillac that they are paying $750 a month for repossessed twice. They are now moving into a more expensive house renting. According to my rough estimate, their house and car cost more than the retail salary the sole income is making. Friend 2 also has a child. Also has their, more reasonable in fairness, car repossessed many times. They moved out of state for the husband's job that he was making good money, and he lost his job for not showing up. Moved back and started begging for money constantly, asking their parents, friends, and even me, not really a friend, but I guess she got my Venmo to request money, and got evicted because they haven't paid rent in months. They are not looking for jobs, nor are they looking for apartments. They will probably soon be homeless with their kid. A shame because that job they moved out of state for can get up to $150K, but instead, he's unemployed, and she's working at a daycare part-time. Nice people, all of them, and I understand times are hard because we're still young and moved out, but I've never met 4 people so bad at handling money. Story 16. Having an expensive car and complaining about how everything is so expensive or that they can't afford something. I have someone in my circle that makes nearly $100K from home, no student debt or anything like that, but absolutely refuses to live anywhere but downtown in the city, $2K plus rent per month, purchased an expensive car, $900 monthly payment, has to pay to park it, $100 plus per month, and doesn't drive it. They bitch about having over half of their money disappear every month when they could just not have purchased a 85K paperweight and moved 20 miles north to a nice suburb for half the rent. Same person will say shit like, eat the rich, and in reality they're squandering over 50% of their cash every month on shit they don't need. Don't even get me started on the bills from eating out, traveling, etc. Smart person, bad with money. Story 17. When you get a relatively large insurance settlement after becoming permanently disabled in a way that prevents you from working and needing to live off that money for an unknown amount of time, then immediately dropping several $1,000s on redoing the entire living room in camo, also knowing you'll be in a wheelchair for about 3-4 months, and spending another several thousand out of that limited sum to turn the already good-sized back porch into a giant deck so you can roll around in bigger laps. When you get a relatively large insurance settlement after becoming permanently disabled in a way that prevents you from working and needing to live off that money for an unknown amount of time, then immediately dropping several $1,000s on redoing the entire living room in camo, also knowing you'll be in a wheelchair for about 3-4 months and spending another several thousand out of that limited sum to turn the already good-sized back porch into a giant deck so you can roll around in bigger laps. Story 18. While contemplating my opinion, I realized the people I consider bad with money often have richer experiences in terms of pleasures they afford themselves. I've worked hard to do things right, and while I have things on track, I haven't lived much. I don't foresee myself ending up in a line for unemployment benefits, food bank assistance, or bankruptcy support due to the nature of my line of work and my income, but I also don't predict I'll ever allow myself to fully enjoy life. I may be financially secure, but I'm also fairly depressed. Story 19. When you complain that you can't afford rent or medicine, yet every day you go out to eat and go to bars with friends. I know friends like this who complain about cost of living and how hard it is to make ends meet when they spend money as quick as they earn it. They also keep adopting dogs. Story 20. Reading these comments reminded how I don't understand how people in their late teens and early 20s are able to afford brand new cars like BMWs, Hondas, and Toyotas. I'm 25 and I drive a 2006 Corolla. I'm not broke, but I'm also not rich and could not imagine trying to pay a brand new car off. Seeing all these kids drive new cars is kind of discouraging, although I know it should have the opposite effect. Story 21. Owning a timeshare. Full disclosure, I own a timeshare. LOL. In my defense, my mother was going to have to file bankruptcy because of it, if I didn't take it off her hands, because they're practically unsellable even though it has a deed, so I got it for free. Not only is the original model a bad investment, but now people are paying $20,000 for vacation points that they can use anywhere, and then having to pay $1,000 a year or more on maintenance for points, which makes no sense whatsoever. At least I can pretend the $1,000 a year I pay for maintenance goes to actually maintaining the piece of property I pretend to own. Ha! But for $1,000 a week, I could find a very nice unit to rent in the same area. Definitely a bad money move. Story 22. Everything they own comes from a subscription service. Groceries from apps or DoorDash, etc., subscriptions for toiletries bi-monthly, more streaming services than they could ever watch, excessive Patreon, OV subs. My friend had to declare bankruptcy because she signed up for too many of these things, and it drained at least 2 credit cards. When it was all said and done, she said she didn't even recognize some of the things she was apparently paying for. Story 23. Extreme lifestyle inflation and/or infinity chasing. I have a lot of associates who work in high-paying professional jobs that are constantly swapping out their house, car, every time that they get a raise, yet they constantly complain about being short on money. A lot of them are closer to financial ruin, despite making multiple times more than I do in a mechanical optical engineering. I've also encountered a few of those gotta hustle, gotta grind, gotta monetize every walking moment of your life people. And they, in my experience, usually work so hard because they're infinity chasing. They don't actually have any tangible goals or ambitions, so make the pile bigger is all they really have going for them. Story 24. Well, my wife, soon to be ex, quit her job while I was deployed as I provided for the rent plus some. She burnt through all her savings and asked me for money a bit. She left me for another dude and now I'm leaving and she won't have that support, so she had to get a job and could only get one as a waitress as she has no education or anything. She's broke AF, needs to save to move, but is still going out almost every day to party or eat out or go to bars getting coffee. A whole bunch of unnecessary shit that's draining her financially. I suggested she saves, but OFC, that didn't get taken well. Story 25. Chasing hardware and never satisfied with what they have. They have a perfectly good thing, but they need that other thing, which is ever so slightly different. It's a constant cycle of expensive switching or micro upgrades, which, since they're bad with money, ends up on a CC that they don't pay off. They end up digging themselves into debt a little deeper and paying double on said items when it's all done. To add on top of the above, CC debt in general. Sure, there may have been a legit emergency and they had no choice, but 99.9% of people just accept it as a way of life and keep going negative. Live within your means while bettering yourself to sustain the way of life you want. Don't try and achieve that on CC debt, it won't work out. Too much unsustainable instant gratification. Story 26. I mean, having a nice car when you're unemployed is a classic, but something that often gets missed is when people tell me that they made money in their house, but don't know the roar because they don't understand the costs and expenses. I also have a friend whose mortgage is $6K and is borderline negative equity position, but refuses to sell and rent because we are all in the same boat. We aren't. That's illogical. Also, I have a friend who has cash to pay off her mortgage, but thinks it's better to keep that money in cash and carry debt, but refuses to invest in the stock market and just keeps it in cash. Also, I have friends that doesn't understand how RSPs and RESPs work and refuse to invest in them when they would benefit because of their high income. And there's more. I have friends who have had a very high income for 10 years, but their net worth is only half of their current year salary. It's like, where did the money go? I have a friend who could have owed $0 in taxes, but she missed the RSP deadline and now her paycheck is being garnished because she hasn't done her taxes in 10 years. Meanwhile, she goes around paying for rent and buying cars for her family members. I have so many examples. Story 27. Dude showed up in a beaten-up truck that barely ran and hadn't worked in 2 years and owed the government a pile of money, made one check and was bragging about his new VR and 5K gaming setup he just bought, then asked everyone for help to boost his truck when it failed to work. Story 28. Can I get your rent early this month? I don't have money for gas. This coming from a person who makes 10 times what I make in a year, who is going through financial restructuring on her tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt because she can't file bankruptcy again. Story 29. Buying cheap, trendy stuff in bulk instead of a couple of classic quality items. This applies to clothes, furniture, etc. Having a salary job and not investing anything. I also feel like the more obsessed you are with money, the worse you are at handling it. Not a hard and fast rule, but it shows you have a weird relationship with it to some degree. Story 30. Dealing with a family member birching about them and their spouse spending $5K/MO on living expenses while living in a trailer. $2,200 a month on food is extremely high even in a HCOL environment for 2 people, and they should consider not eating out regularly. $500 a month on storage of items that after a year they could have bought back new. But hey, I guess some people want to complain instead. Story 31. I used to work with a woman that was in more debt than I can conceptualize. In the 3 or so years we worked together, she bought 2 houses, a camper, 2 trucks, a motorcycle, a lot for the camper, remodeled both the houses, not to mention constant vacations and concerts and being at the bar multiple nights a week buying shots for everyone. We were both making less than $20 an hour in the nursing home, as key and as. We did not have money, lol. She had to work 80-hour weeks to keep up with all her payments, would complain constantly about how tired and sore she was, and was just useless to have as a coworker because she was so damn tired she couldn't do anything. She would work 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. multiple days a week and still manage to be at the bar between shifts. IDK what she's up to now, but probably the same shit, TBH. Story 32. You literally don't know what happened to your money. It comes and goes like water. There are people who make a lot of money and just blow through it. If you ask them on what, they could barely tell you. No strategy, no budget, and a serious lack of security as a result, despite making 6 figures. Story 33. Well, my parents have lived in my grandparents' house since I was born. Never ever had any type of vehicle, always, since I can remember, had troubles to pay for basic food, gone long time without paying bills, so no lights for some days or even no water, and a long etc. There's a metric fucking crapton of unpayable debt between both my parents. No, neither are college educated, neither have secret families' lives, believe me, I've investigated. Neither has owned, participated in any business in their life, and never in our whole life we've had any luxuries. Neither of them actually know how or why. They just accepted it as their status quo, being indebted for life for no reason whatsoever, and keep accruing debt, interests of past debt plus loans for basic things like food, till their last day on Earth. My sister and I have investigated the issue, and there aren't traces of anything wrong/shady/weird. They are the pinnacle of being bad with money, the avatar of debt, just being indebted by existing. Story 34, I know multiple people who make more money than I do, live in the same city, and like me do not have dependents, but still complain of living paycheck to paycheck. So this says to me they must blow their entire paycheck on bullshit. Some people just do not get the value of saving and struggle with that delayed gratification. Well, when my used semi-old car needed $800 of maintenance, I had it, and it wasn't a catastrophe. Would I have rather spent $800 on fun stuff? Sure, but I also like having a car that works. Story 35. Not living within your means. I know too many people that constantly complain about being broke, yet every month I see photos of them on some sort of vacation, or they get a new car, big impulse buys, etc. Short-term thinking. If they scaled back, thought about something before making an impulse buy, it'd lead to better savings, and you can make better choices of when to splurge on a vacation. It's not as fun, but it's practical, and I think social media has had a bad influence on others' spending.